The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Julian Assange back in 2010 at an anti-war rally. Heard it before. I'm going to keep playing it every week, folks. And then the theme song from The Third Man with some nice photos that Kelly Lane put together of some of our past guests here on Assange Countdown to Freedom. Ostensibly, that's what this show is. Randy Credico live on the fly. Assange Countdown to Freedom here on Progressive Radio Network. But today we're going to do something different. We're going to talk about Assange. We got the only major candidate running for Senate in this country, or even for the House, that is a vocal, emphatic, eloquent supporter of Julian Assange. And I got to see this gentleman in action just on October 8th in D.C. There was the rally at the DOJ in support of Julian Assange. And I've known Matthew Ho, not personally, but through social media for a long time. He is running for Senate in North Carolina. There's a lot of controversy in terms of the powers that be that tried to suppress his candidacy. So we're going to talk about that and talk about his crossing the Rubicon in 2009 and all of the great things that he stands for. You may have seen him on, and you can get it at Facebook because I watched part of it this morning, this great dialogue he had with our dear friend Roger Waters. So go to Facebook, Matthew Ho, H-O-H, and check out that dialogue that he had on his website. And so let's get back to October 8th, folks. This is Matthew Ho. Here's a pastiche of this brilliant, eloquent speech that he delivered somewhere in the middle of the pack of some great speakers. Here we go.
The first time I was asked to speak about Julian was when the Apache gunship murder video came out. It was myself and another veteran on television were asked to speak about that. And we sat there, and both of our responses were, my God, what did you think we were doing over there? What Julian and WikiLeaks has done for millions of people who otherwise would have been killed without voice, without name, without dignity. That is why he is in Belmarsh. That is why they want to bring him here. That is why they want to murder him. I have seen mothers with their dead children, their dead sons, their dead daughters, whose cries are in Arabic, Pashto, Dari, English. It doesn't matter. They are the same. They are our brothers and sisters. And without Julian and without WikiLeaks, those people would have had no voice. They would have no names. There would be no dignity for them at all. The murder that this country has committed over and over again in countless cities, in countless villages across the globe has continued for decades. And without Julian, without WikiLeaks, those men and women and their families would have been lost to history.
Well, there you go. That gentleman, Matthew Ho will be joining us in just 1 minute, is running for Senate. If you live in North Carolina, I have friends that live in North Carolina. Get out there and vote. There's no sense, saying, well, it's Democrats versus Republicans, and if this person wins, we're going to lose. We're going to lose this seat. We're going to lose. They've done nothing. They've been in charge of the House and the Senate and the presidency for the past couple of years, and nothing progressive has happened. We've escalated the war in Ukraine. We are basically at an existential moment, and you can blame the Democrats, all of them, for not standing up against it. Okay. All right. Back we had Frank Church, we had George McGovern, we had others back then. McCarthy, Eugene McCarthy. We had those kind of senators back then that stood up against the war. There's nobody in DC that's standing up for it. So, don't hold your nose between the two parties. Go for Matthew Ho and donate. Go to his website. And I've had him waiting here for a long time. So we're going to get right into it with him. We're going to go to a little break here, music break, and come right back, a little station ID, and we'll talk with candidate for Senate, the Green Party, Matthew Ho. Okay, that was Dmitry Shostakovich, a sweet, and who knows, before this show is over, that music may be banned along with Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov and many other Russian composers. Matthew, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. I've been wanting you on for a long time now. All right? I've been wanting you on for a long time. You've been busy. And I saw you at that rally down in D.C., and I said, my God, we're getting close to the election. I got to get you on before the election. Here we are.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. It's good to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you on. Let me go back to that speech to Assange. Why do you think you're the only candidate that I know of, major candidate, I consider you a major candidate, that is supporting Assange? Have you brought it up in debates or forums or anything with your Republican, Libertarian, and Democratic competitors?
We've not had any debate. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And there are other candidates, both Green and Libertarian candidates across the country, who are running in defense of Julian Assange, in defense of Daniel Hale, in defense of Chelsea Manning, in defense of WikiLeaks, in defense of, speaking truth about, the wars, about the corruption, right? The murder. But their names are not known. They are as suppressed as is the news about Julian Assange, right? I mean, to find any coverage what's happening with Julian Assange, you really have to work kind of hard at that. For me in this race, we have had no opportunity to debate the Republican or the Democrat. I've done a number of things with the Libertarian, and I believe twice speaking with him, these issues of whistleblowers, of Julian Assange, about freedom of the press, those things have come up. But in terms of the Democrats, Republicans, I'm quite sure that neither Ted Budd, who's running for the Republicans for the U.S. Senate, or Sherry Beasley, who's running for the Democrats for the U.S. Senate, have ever uttered a statement about Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, or anything similar in support of whistleblowers, say, at all. They are corporate captured establishment candidates.
I look at this person, Beasley, by the way, you mentioned her. Sherry Beasley, is that it?
Sherry Beasley, yep.
Yeah, it's a former state district judge, not a federal, but state judge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know her record in terms of free speech and protecting people's environmental and civil rights in that state? What is her record like?
Her record is she's very defensive of her criminal record. So the Republicans went after her, saying she was soft on crime. So almost everything you've heard from her camp on her record has been how she has been tough on crime. I have seen very little in terms of any defense of the environment, very little in terms of any civil rights action outside of what the mainstream Democratic Party would do. So she's very much in lockstep. She is a Joe Biden Democrat. I imagine, say, on an issue such as trans rights or marriage equality or something like that, she is where the administration is. She is where the administration certainly is in terms of Julian Assange, free speech, protection of journalism, et cetera. So I don't expect anything from her if she were elected to be a champion for anything that the White House doesn't want her to be a champion for.
Are you getting a lot of flack because that you could be a spoiler here from
You know what, Randy? The only people I get flack from that are online, Twitter. You get the trolls coming at you. Podcasts, because these are the people that are in the weeds about that, in the details, are all nerds about it and everything. Or hyper partisans, so people who every night watch MSNBC for 3 hours or Fox for 3 hours.
Ugh.
Those are the only people you hear that from. We had a petition to get on the ballot. We had to go out, collect signatures. So we talked to tens of thousands of people doing that. We've talked to thousands more people these last couple of months. We go out to festivals, events, candidate forums. I can count in the last 8 or 9 months the number of times, about 3 or 4 times only, have I had somebody, a normal person, a regular person, a person who's not mainlining, Rachel Maddow. Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, that sense that you don't hear that from normal folks. You don't hear that from regular people. What you hear from people that you actually meet are housing, healthcare, war on drugs, the overdoses, the incarceration, and also to transportation issues.
I can't think of any major progressive issue that has been passed in the last 2 years or even brought up. The other day, there was group of 30 Democrats, had some resolution they were going to send Biden. They decided to, squash it. So it's really disheartening and it's depressing. And myself, I the consequences of the election, I don't know how bad it is. Jim Jordan on the could be the head of the House Judiciary Committee. Not that the House Judiciary Committee under Gerald Nadler and under Jamie Raskin and these folks have done anything to protect the First Amendment. These guys are constitutional scholars, and they have done nothing and I said it last week, and I stick to it 2 weeks ago, that this is basically the persecution of Assange is a direct attack on the First Amendment, which is the strongest pillar of this democracy. If that folds, the whole thing folds. The whole Bill of Rights folds. And there's your coup against this democracy. Right. And where are these constitutional scholars when it comes to supporting and protecting this democracy?
Yeah, we actually won my campaign in the North Carolina Green Party, won a First Amendment case this summer. That's the grounds we sued on in federal court to make sure that we were going to be on the ballot. As I said just before, we had to go out, collect signatures. We did that. We vastly exceeded the number we needed to get. We needed 14,000. We brought in 22,500. And then the State Board of Elections, which is controlled by the Democratic Party, said, nope, we have questions. We're not going to certify you. Oh, too bad. You've missed the deadline. So we have to go now and file suit against the state of North Carolina in federal court, which is what we did. And our argument was on First and 14th Amendment grounds. So for me personally, this was something I saw where it's very easy for the established powers, those who do not want any type of political competition or, in the sense of Julian and WikiLeaks, truth about what they've done, to see the light. It's very easy for them to, they'll say all the things they want to say, Nadler and Raskin, constitutional scholars or whatever. That doesn't matter. If they're scared, if they're nervous, if they feel like something might go against them, they'll turn on that in a heartbeat. So everything they say about the Constitution, about the First Amendment, about our freedoms, our liberties, it all is dependent upon whether or not that's going to have an impact on them and their donors, right?
It just, they don't stand up. There's nobody out there that will stand up. This is a free speech, the most fundamentally important. And I even know Green Party people that were lukewarm on Assange and said he was connected to helping out Trump, and like looking at that and not the bigger picture that this is a First Amendment. They're ready to throw Assange into the ocean there under the bus because they think he had something to do with Trump winning. It had nothing to do with the fact that she had a terrible campaign, and Julian did not give her a map, Hillary, that excluded a campaign map that excluded Wisconsin and Michigan. All right. She had a terrible warmongering campaign. She was controlled by Wall Street. She just murdered Berta Cáceres down in Honduras. She just murdered, was participant in now the new slave state of Libya. She supported the Patriot Act. She supported HR 347. She supported all of these other repressive measures. So why would I vote for her in 2016? She sabotaged her own campaign. And then WikiLeaks was able to show us that she screwed Bernie Sanders.
Right.
I can't imagine anyone blaming Julian Assange for that. You know?
Right. And then, I mean, look,
that's a nice
the narrative that gets put out there.
You have behind you.
What's that?
It's a nice poster that.
Oh, the Assange poster, yeah. You know what? Actually last year when I hadn't been on MSNBC since 2014.
What?
And yeah, and that's the last time I was on MSNBC for 2014 because I was arguing against escalating the war in Syria. So that was the last they had me on. CNN or MSNBC was 2014. I've been cut off since then. And in the last year, when we retreated from Afghanistan, where that was a complete catastrophe for the Afghans, where we saw what happened in Kabul and everything else, and everything was all about Afghanistan all of a sudden, MSNBC had me back on. Mehdi Hassan actually did. And I had that poster behind me during that show. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be back on MSNBC now for another 8 or 9 years, right? After going on their airwaves with that thing behind me, right? With Julian's face.
I see the speech that you wrote, and I'm going to have to. This is a statement. This is from ABC News. All right. Now, I'm not the greatest reader in the world. All right. This is what you said when you resigned. All right. Unless you know it by heart, you can say, I feel that our strategy in Afghanistan not pursuing goals that are worthy of sacrificing our young men. It's not happening. And women are spending all of this money. And you go on and on. Holt says this and that you believe that this is what you say. And I'm going to have to redo this and do a dub on it because I'm doing such a bad job reading it. But I believe, and we'll put this up, that the people we're fighting over there are fighting us because we are occupying them. Not because they have these certain beliefs in America being this satanic area. It's because we are occupying. That's the leitmotif of this speech that you gave. And this is 2009. That's the reason why they were fighting us. It had nothing to do with anything else. You saw that when you were a diplomat. Now, I guess this is in April or May, whenever the surge took place. Was it when the surge took place that you decided to make
that was the fall of 2009. The surge begins almost immediately when Barack Obama comes in office. We've done the U.S. media and have done a very good job of cleaning up that whole experience in Afghanistan. So when Obama comes in office, most people don't recall this. There were only 30,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan, about 15,000 NATO troops, and a roughly equivalent amount of contractors. Within a year and a half, there are 100,000 U.S. troops, 40,000 NATO troops, and again, an equivalent amount of contractors, or 100,000 contractors.
You're going to be kidding me, 100,000 contractors?
Yeah, I mean, like the amount of money being made on this, but that's also the outsourcing of the war. So Clinton begins the outsourcing of war in the 90s. You see that with the Balkans, right? And Halliburton, KBR start getting these huge contracts. Dick Cheney becomes vice president. But there's also an aspect to it that the Pentagon enjoys. And this is where you've seen the evolution of American warfare go, to where you have very few American troops actually in combat. Look, most people don't know, like in these wars, we've had 7,000 service members killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. More contractors were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. About 8,000 or 8,500 were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and 7,000 service members were killed. Nobody knows that. And all those contractors, Randy, were doing jobs that in any other war, they would have been wearing a uniform. They were driving trucks. They were delivering supplies. You know what I mean? Like all kinds of stuff that the military used to do, but now it's been, because it's so profitable, outsourced to corporations. You know what I mean? So the cost of these wars are hitting. I mean, this gets back to what Julian has done, right? Exposing a lot of this, telling the truths about these things. You know, when I spoke out against the Afghan war, I hedged quite a bit because, you know, I had this idea that somehow I would go back into government service. There are guys like Tony Lake and some others from the Vietnam era who have resigned over the Vietnam War and then gone back into government service later. You know, people are like, oh, look, these guys were right about the Vietnam War. Things have changed. Things are different. The American political system is so scared, so repulsed by anything that is counter to what it believes is its survival, that it will punish anyone and everything. And the media goes along with that, right? So, I mean, it became clear to me after a year or two, like, no, you need to stop hedging. You need to speak more openly about this. So I really didn't start calling war organized murder until 2011 or 2012. I was still afraid of stepping on toes, even though in that period before, like when I resigned in 2009, just giving an example, when I resigned, the Washington Post did a big story on me. This is back when we still read newspapers, right? You know, so above the fold, front page, expose on me, like 3,000 words or something like that in the Post. And I asked the author of that piece, Karen DeYoung, who was a big editor at the Post at the time, why'd you do this? Why'd you sink so much capital in me this way? And she said, because when I asked people at the White House, at the National Security Council, the Pentagon, the State Department, the CIA, wherever I asked them about what you were saying in Afghanistan, everyone agreed with you. No one would say that publicly, but everyone agreed with what you were saying about the war, that the opposition there is based on occupation. It was futile. You're never going to win. Surging, escalating the war is only going to make the war worse. It's just, we're just going to lose at some point, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, but there's this, get back to Julian and the narrative on him and the control that's put out there, the ability for people to just know one or two things about Julian Assange that are told to them by our politically correct media. And that establishes a narrative that we don't need to talk about this guy. This guy's up to no good. You know, he's not someone we need to stick our necks out for. Even journalists, when I talk to journalists about this, most of them don't know anything about Julian Assange.
It's amazing. I know that. Amazing.
And they look at you with like, they're not comprehending what you're saying about the First Amendment, about free speech, about the freedom of the press. When you talk about this, they don't put those, that hasn't been explained to them. They don't understand that. They think this is just a clear hacking case or a clear stealing of government secrets by people who are up to no good aligned with the Russian government, a clear espionage case. This is what most journalists think. And when you explain it to them, they say, whoa. But then they have their own, they need to protect themselves. And they say, well, if I step out of line on this, I could get in trouble. People are going to come down on me. I don't want to take that pressure. We know the government's surveilling journalists. So why stick my neck out on this? I'm going to lose my access. I won't be able to get into the Pentagon anymore to go to the briefings. All these different things that media has been castrated by, and the ability of the government to control it, we see play out so well in Julian's case.
Very well said. We're going to play a clip of what he said about the Afghan war later on. I'm going to give Kelly some time to locate that if she hasn't. Also, we're going to play. We have somebody that is running for governor in New York State, and that also is going to be down there on November 3rd in North Carolina, along with Jill Stein at a rally that we're going to put on. He's got his own podcast in a few minutes, but I asked him to come on just to say hello and, talk about the rally next week. And that is Howie Hawkins, who is an old friend of mine. Howie, you there? I think we've got him. He's been waiting for a while. And so there's Howie.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Randy.
How you doing there? So we're talking about this rally next week. You're a strong supporter of Matthew Holt. Tell me why he's such a good candidate there, Howie.
Well, he's for dropping the charges on Julian Assange, for one. I mean, we've got Republicans running around in camo gear and masks with AK-47s intimidating voters at drop boxes. We have a real threat to democracy from the right. But as you guys just discussed, the silence of the Democrats, including Sherry Beasley, who Matt's running against, and the whole media establishment, they're gutless. And it is a threat to the First Amendment. It's a crucial issue. So if for no other reason, people should vote for Matt Holt to vote for the First Amendment.
Right.
But also, he's the only candidate for a real Green New Deal, Medicare for all, election reforms, ranked choice voting, and proportional representation in legislatures. So we get rid of the spoiler effect, and we get rid of the gerrymandering of districts that makes over 90% of them uncompetitive. They're farcical elections. So that's how we get a multi-party democracy, a real democracy. And that's what Matt Holt stands for. And if people say, well, I got to vote for the Democrat because the Republican's even worse, they get lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
If they want the First Amendment, if they want Medicare for all, if they want Green New Deal, and they vote for a candidate like Beasley as a lesser evil, she's against those things. So you're voting against your own interests. You get lost in the sauce. Nobody knows you want those things if you vote for the Democrat.
Right.
So, you know,
listen, I voted for you. You know,
huh?
I ran for governor in 2014 against Cuomo and Teachout, as you recall. And as soon as I lost the primary, who did I support? All right, I didn't support the Democratic Party. I was out there with Howie Hawkins, and you and I were up there in Harlem with New York One, canvassing for votes back in 2014. And so I agree. I ran. It was performance art for me. But in trying to challenge the system somewhat. But for you guys, you're both serious candidates. You've always been a serious candidate, and you're dedicated. Matthew, this is not performance art. This is a serious campaign, and you're out there to win it, right?
Right. I mean, the everything about this, like for you guys, is personal to me. You know, I mean, I'll never forgive myself for taking part in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but I can do something about that now, right? I have people in my life who are suffering, making dangerous decisions because they have to check their bank accounts before they call their doctor. Right? I've my neighbors across the street, both houses across the street from me, they had to move because corporations came in, bought those homes and raised the rents. I don't have kids on my street anymore because of that, let alone what happened to them, right? You know, I mean, like this, and on and on and on. The number of overdose deaths I know, right? I mean, like number of families I know who've been wrecked by that. If you're a combat veteran, you know what I'm talking about with that, right? But throughout our society, we see that we have 12 overdose deaths a day in North Carolina. I mean, so this is all very personal to me. I know it's the same for you all, right? I mean, so it is. This is very serious stuff. What we're talking about is life and death. And certainly in the case of Julian, in the case of free speech, First Amendment protections, what's under assault here, it is life or death. Because if we don't have that, if journalists cannot report the truth, whether the government likes it or not, you know, what we've seen will be nothing compared to what the government will do.
Right. Let me, Howie, you're running for, I got to get this in because I may not get you on before the election. I was talking to Kelly, the engineer and editor here, about voter suppression. It's not just voter suppression in terms of the Democrats and Republicans voter suppression. There's also voter suppression against third parties. And the Green Party, I believe, is a victim of voter suppression. Can you hash that out for us, Howard, how that takes place?
Yeah, well, you were talking about 2014. I got 5% of the vote. Andrew Cuomo wanted to run up the vote to get ready to run for president. He wanted more votes than his daddy, Mario Cuomo, ever got. He wanted more votes than he got when he was first elected in 2010. And he got less. And then he had to accommodate, well, how do I compete for those votes that the Green Party got? We got a ban on fracking, a $15 minimum wage, and paid family leave. Well, he didn't like that. So when at his first opportunity, which was in 2020, he got a law passed that tripled the number of votes we need to stay on the ballot, doubled the frequency from just governor's races to presidential and governor's races, and tripled the number of signatures we need to get back on the ballot if we lose it. Well, we lost the ballot in 2020, and we, along with 7 other gubernatorial tickets, tried to get on the ballot in New York in 2022. None of us succeeded because ballot access in New York is now the most difficult of any state in the nation. And really, I have a hard time finding any other petition around the world that is as difficult. So we're reduced to a write-in vote.
This is supposed to be a progressive state, the most progressive state in the country, or at least on the east.
Well, you know, the progressives ain't so progressive.
Right.
They can't see the threat to the First Amendment in the Assange case. And the Democrats have, except for 2 exceptions, Liz Kruger and Charles Barron, were silent when this draconian ballot access law passed.
I can't believe that it happened. I know that I got on the ballot. It's difficult as it is. In 2010, when I ran against Schumer, I needed 15,000 signatures back then. I got like 20,000, 22,000, and he was able to get me off like that. And it took 3 people on a joint petition just to get that many. And plus I was sabotaged by 2 ringers that were part of that joint petition. So they do things like that. And so why wouldn't he just allow me on the ballot? I'm not going to beat him in the primary. Why not just say, hey, we're into democracy, as many candidates as possible? Obviously, they're not.
Because they're not into democracy, right. The Republicans directly suppress voters they don't think will vote for them. The Democrats do it by suppressing parties that they think will take votes from them. That means the Green Party. So voter suppression is another form. Party suppression is another form of voter suppression. That's what we're getting from the Democrats. We got 2 corporate parties that really don't give a damn about democracy.
Right. Let's get back to you, Matthew. How many signatures did you need to get on the ballot? And how many hurdles were there just to, get your name on the ballot? Legally and physically?
We needed a little less than 14,000. We collected 22,500 of those. And then in North Carolina, the counties verify your signatures. So we had more than 16,000 verified. So we were over by 2,100. And we dropped those off. We met all the requirements. There's never a doubt that we missed a deadline or anything like that. Everything was done correctly. And the State Board of Elections, what they did, and State Board of Elections here in North Carolina, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans on the board, controlled by the governor's office. Supposed to be nonpartisan, but as we would find out, was not nonpartisan by any means. What happens is, to be brief, is that by law, you're supposed to certify the party and then certify the candidates by July 1st. We had turned in by June 1st our signatures. By July 1st, we're supposed to be certified and be on the ballot. The State Board of Elections waited until the last day possible, June 30th, to hold a certification hearing. And then they said, we have questions about your process. We can't go forward with this. We can't certify you. Oh, and tomorrow's the deadline, so too bad, so sad. Right. But their whole argument was basically very similar to what Trump and those crooks were saying, a couple of years ago with the presidential election. There's fraud. We can't tell you what it is. We can't show it to you, but you have to believe us that there's fraud here. That's what they're saying to us. They provided no evidence, allowed for no due diligence, never provided any type of legal reasoning for what they were doing. And so we had to sue. We went to federal court. We basically did a ton of media as well. We backed the State Board of Elections into a corner. I'm very proud of our efforts with that. And then the State Board of Elections, after taking more than 2.5 months, delaying our campaign for more than 2.5 months, finally had to say, there's really nothing here. We're going to certify you. The federal court agreed. All through this time, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee was down here. So literally 2 days after we turned in our signatures, the Elias Law Group, headed by Mark Elias, who's arguably the biggest Democratic attorney in the country, is down here working against this. They are, Sherry Beasley is a client of theirs. The whole thing's so crooked. We have emails between the governor's office, the Elias Law Group, and the State Board of Elections, making sure the Elias Law Groups gets the information they need to keep us off the ballot. The whole thing is dirty. I believe, like as you said, Randy, that we have people involved who sabotaged us. They made this whole big thing about fraud and that they were going to turn it over to the State Board investigations. And after they got back in the corner, after they had to certify us, after the federal court ruled in our favor, all those things, they never did anything with it. They just dropped it. And I think, as it happened with you, I think we had a couple people who were involved who were trying to sabotage us at the behest of the Democratic Party, because we've seen that done throughout the country. I mean, and this guy, Mark Elias, this is where he gets his notoriety from, right? Is 2004 doing this against John Kerry. I mean, doing this for John Kerry's campaign against Ralph Nader's campaign. But, you know, we did very proud of my team, of the folks here in the Green Party who fought this. We didn't just win in federal court. We won in federal appeals court. And then the state Democratic Party had brought a lawsuit against us in state court, which they ultimately had to drop because they knew there was no chance of winning. So we did very well, but it cost us because we spent the entire summer fighting these things rather than campaigning. And it really did. Looking back now, you can say, man, if we had started the campaign back in the summer as opposed to the last week of August, it would have made a difference.
Well, you're a great candidate, and I agree with that. I'm sure you would have had a lot more momentum. Let me ask you, where do you stand on the ballot? What it's probably Democrat or Republican, then Democrat, and then how does it look on the ballot? Where are you position-wise?
On the actual physical ballot, I'm in the top, on the physical ballot.
When I go in there to vote, where do I see you?
I'm the first one. I'm on the top left. That's random. It's random because the way the state assigns the ballot positions, they pull a letter, a bingo ball out of a hat, basically, and it starts with letter such and such, and all the other three candidates start with B. I'm H. They pulled out letter C, so I'm the first one on the ballot. So top left of the ballot. So at the very least, yeah, at the very least, I'll get some votes, right? He'll say like, "Hey, this guy, he's top of the ballot," you know. But you know, but in polling and in everything else, we've had libertarians are the same way. We had a ton of I'll say this too, because I think this is important for people to understand. We had a ton of media coverage over the summer because of this. We had, I think there were 5 national Associated Press stories about this lawsuit, about the fight with the State Board of Elections. And there were 3 national NPR stories. I mean, we had a lot of press.
That's how I heard about your story. Was
the thing with
media. As little as I watch or listen to it, it's been 9 months since I've listened to, since the first week of the situation in Ukraine, that I've watched MSNBC or CNN. I know the last date was February 23rd, but it's the last time I saw either one of those channels. And I never listened to NPR, RW, whatever the one is in New York City, WNYC. I don't listen to it. I considered all U.S. state affiliated media outlets. That's how I look at it. Same way they say it's Russia state media outlets. No, we have U.S. state affiliated media outlets. Does anybody disagree with that characterization?
No, I mean, and what we saw is even after all that coverage, once we got on the ballot, once they couldn't frame the story as the Green Party is committing fraud to get on the ballot, once it became clear that there was never any fraud, the story stopped. Right. And since beginning of September, media-wise, both myself and my libertarian counterpart, our only mentions in major media here in North Carolina are at the end of the article. Matthew Ho and Shannon Bray are also running. The college journalists, they'll write about you. You know, you'll get independent media that will. But in terms of like the established media, I had the first established media or establishment media called me just the other day in a couple months. And I don't even think they're going to include that in the story that they're doing. So, but that's what you're up against. You have, as long as they could portray it as the Green Party was committing fraud, they were happy to have us in their media. Once it was clear we didn't, and once now we were actual competition, and once, oh my God, if we cover these guys, we're going to have to talk about Medicare for all. We're going to have to talk about a Green New Deal. We're going to have to talk about the wars. We're going to have to talk about the war on drugs, talk about housing. Then you're off. Then you're not included any longer.
We're going to go down a state instead of Virginia. Mr. Ho goes to Washington real soon, we hope. Howie, I know you got to go. You got a podcast coming up. How do people? You're not on the ballot, but you can. You and Gloria Matera are writing a candidacy, and tell people what they have to do on Election Day, November 8th.
They can do it today. Early voting started today, so in the next 10 days, go to the gubernatorial column. Go to the bottom. There's a space for write-ins, and write in Howie Hawkins, and Gloria Matera. And unlike North Carolina, which is a lot more progressive, where they randomly put people on the ballot, here it's the biggest voter in the last election, the Democrats, gets the top spot, and they're the biggest party in the state. So the Democrats are always on top, and then the Republicans. And then you got two parasite parties that are satellites of the major parties, conservative and working families, which run the major party candidates.
Right.
And then
I don't know why they call themselves the Working Families Party, because they're neither. They're not working or family parties.
They're NGO middle class folks that claim to speak for us.
They all make $200,000 a year. I know who those.
Yeah, I'm an actual retired Teamster now that ran for governor 3 times, and they wouldn't give me the time of day. They wouldn't answer inquiries.
You're a working man. You are. I know what you do, Hal, and Hal. That's why I voted for you 3 times. And
I appreciate that.
Twice, and I voted for Jill Stein twice. I haven't voted for a Democrat since McGovern. All right, that was my first vote in '72, and my last one for a Democrat, other than myself. All right, listen, Howie. I know you got to go places, so I'm going to let you go. What is your
campaign website is Hawkins Matera, one word, Mattera is Gloria's last name, hawkinsmatera.org.
All right.
And there's a sample ballot on there. You can see where the box is and their instructions and the platform, news releases, news stories. And thanks for having me on, Randy.
All right. So you guys see each other on November 3rd. All right. You guys, I'm going to say goodbye to you, Howie. We're going to take a quick musical break here. I don't know what we have. Maybe we have Humorous, and come back and continue with Senate candidate Matthew Ho. Thank you, Howie. Good luck.
Howie. Good to see you, man.
All right. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere, Matthew. See if we got this music lined up. Okay, I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly, Assange Countdown to Freedom. The special episode today, we're looking at the very important race in North Carolina with a very important candidate, someone that I support, and we're going to find out how you can support him. If you're a British citizen like Roger Waters, you can support him. You can support him by telling people to vote for him, but you can't put money into his campaign. And so people that want to, I'm sure this last week you would welcome contributions and tell people how, in fact, they can do that, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. And they are important. I mean, we're up against, and I'll just give you an idea. We won't know what the actual numbers are in this campaign for another month or so. But in 2020, in the U.S. Senate race here in North Carolina, they spent $300 million. Right. And the bulk of that was outside dark money, that Citizens United money, that unaccountable corporate money. Right. But for us, if you're a minor party candidate, independent candidate, grassroots candidate, the hardest thing is getting people to know you exist, getting people to know you're an option. I mean, like if the first time someone sees your name on the ballot is when they're marking up the ballot, they're probably not going to vote for you. So for us, this last week or so, we need the help just to get our advertising out, get people to know that we are an option for working families, right? That there's someone to vote for who supports Medicare for all, someone who supports ending the war on drugs, someone who supports rent control, all those things, as well as, an advocate for Julian Assange, press freedom, WikiLeaks, telling the truth, etc. So people can help us out. It's mattforsenate.org, Matt followed by the number 4, senate.org. So Matt, the number 4, senate.org.
Right. And another thing, you're a free speech guy. In the Senate, there's a lot you can get done, particularly when it comes to war. You have reactionaries like Tom Cotton and the other guy from, I forgot, Nebraska. What's his name? Big warmonger.
I actually, Randy, I knew Tom Cotton in Afghanistan.
You did?
I knew the guy. Yeah. He was an Army captain at that point. I was a political officer, State Department. I spent a week on his base. I got to know him a bit. And then, interestingly, when I resigned in protest and spoke out against the war, and did a big media thing in 2009 to 2010. Tom and I debated each other a number of times on CNN, on Fox. In fact, one time he called me and said, we're not going to be on Fox any longer. And I said, why? And he said, because they said we're too cordial to one another. Same thing too. I used to hang out with him in the green room. You know, we were on Larry King together, you know, and like met his, you know, and the point being is that I knew this guy before he became a politician, and he's not the caveman he comes across as. This is a Harvard trained lawyer who is playing to that red meat. And you
is
see
that what he's really doing? He's really.
I've seen that a number of times. I had a number of years ago, we had this Afghanistan study group, right? And we brought in Ann Coulter. It was a big tent. We had Grover Norquist, and we had people from all over the place, and people who wanted us to get out of Afghanistan. We brought in Ann Coulter for an event, right? The right wing, you know, she's very her vitriolic, I guess is the right word for her. And I tell you what, she is nothing like what she's like when she's behind the microphone. When you meet her in person, she is the nicest, most pleasant, smart person you could come across. She gets behind that microphone, and you know, it's like she's put the costume on. Right?
Is that what Tom Cotton's doing?
And I believe that's the same with Cotton.
Not that reactionary, not that gung-ho, not that Jimmy Cagney from Yankee Doodle Dandy mindset, you know, that
it's a reactionary shtick to do well in Arkansas. I believe, I really do. I mean, I think some of his principles are there. I think at heart he is a conservative. He believes in what the conservatives say they believe in. You know, smaller government, less taxation, on and on and on, which they never act upon or actually do. But I think probably if you were to get them truthfully to talk about those things. But the person I knew for a while, including in Afghanistan, is not the same person you see as who is a potential 2024 or more likely maybe 2028 Republican presidential candidate. Not with just the caveman aspects that he portrays, right? This reactionary shtick that he does. I think it is to keep votes or earn votes, or he wants to play to the red crowd, etc.
There's a lot of GIs, a lot of grunts in Arkansas. Arkansas produces, you know, like Alabama and Mississippi. Arkansas's got a high percentage of people in the military, I believe. So you might be playing to that crowd as well. In fact, you know, I was talking to Scott Ritter the other day. What drives this suicidal nuclear proliferation and warmongering and fear-mongering and all of this stuff about buildups and Lloyd Austin coming out, we're going to expand the nuclear. What drives that? And he says it's really Congress. And he said back in the 50s, it was all these congressmen that had, you know, that represented districts like Lyndon Johnson and Stuart Symington in Texas, where they had the B-58 and all these other potential carriers of nuclear weapons, that a lot of it's coming from congressional and specifically the Senate and those on the Armed Services Committee.
Right.
And everyone's got weapons productions in their neighborhoods, in their districts. And so he says that has a lot to do with it. In the Senate right now, are they the driving force behind this continuation of the waste that we're giving to this guy Zelensky and expanding the possibility of a nuclear war?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I actually was on the board of directors for a political action committee a number of years ago, whose purpose was to try and get arms control, try and reduce nuclear weapons. So we would go in and meet with these senators all the time. And if people recall back when Barack Obama was able to sign or get through the New START treaty, which is a strategic arms reduction treaty between the United States and Russia, which is incredibly important, right? Incredibly important. Thankfully, the Biden administration was able to get it done when it came into office. Russia was offering to do it all along. It was the Trump administration that wanted it not to be renewed. But the deal that Obama made with the Senate, and particularly John Kyle, the former senator from Arizona, was we'll do New START if you modernize the nuclear weapons force. So we'll agree to cap our nuclear weapons at 1,500, but we have to modernize them all. And originally that price tag was about $1 trillion. Now the estimates are closer to $2 trillion over 30 years, right? I mean, and for me, that was a big thing for me personally, just talking about DC. Why are you running as a Green? Why aren't you a Democrat? Because that was a Democratic Party aligned PAC. I mean, I wasn't a Democrat, but I was part of that organization, and they said nothing. They didn't want to upset the White House. They did not. They went along with organizations like that. Went along with Obama's nuclear modernization, $1 trillion+ plan, which we're seeing come through now, and which has made everything less safe, because a lot of these modernized weapons are what are called, as the generals will call them, or as people in DC will call them, usable nuclear weapons, which is, as we all know, they're not usable. Escalation is a ladder, right? You either go up the ladder of escalation or you go down it. There's no side to side on that thing. But anyway,
one nuclear weapon, one exchange. I mean, that really is it. I mean, and how have we gone since 1945 without deploying or using a nuclear weapon? We've come close,
very close
many times. You know, people now. I've had a conversation. I was telling Scott this the other day with somebody on the street, a friend of mine I hadn't seen in a couple of years. We were talking about the possibility of a nuclear war. And people, that has not been on people's mindset for a long time. It's about time right now. It should have been on their heads a long time ago. We should have been talking about it a long time ago, because when have weapons that have been developed not ever used in the history of the human race?
Right.
You know, if there's a threat to a country to the point of their existence and they have a nuclear weapon, why would they say we're not going to use this? We'll just use, artillery fire.
Right. And you get into the whole psychological aspects of this, right? The use it or lose it. This is why having a no first use policy is so important, because if another nation can understand that your doctrine is that you don't support first use, that that's not in your doctrine. You won't utilize nuclear weapons first. It's a lot more trust. In this way, that reduces mistakes, that reduces errors, because Randy, the number of times that we've come close where it came down to one person's decision. I mean, there's dozens of experiences like that, dozens of accidents, dozens of times that a command to fire was then negated, or a weather satellite was launched that was misinterpreted. We've both Russian and American, or Russian, Soviet and American leaders have been woken in the middle of the night about these things. I mean, we just had the celebration for Parkov, the Soviet naval commander who countermanded the orders of the Soviet submarine B-59 in the Cuban Missile Crisis to not fire its nuclear torpedo. I mean, we should all not be here. We would all not be here if not for Parkov. I mean, like, we would be all dead, or we would, in my case, I would never have been created. My parents would not have been able to do that, right? I mean, but the danger of this is, the escalation, again, this idea, but this is the arrogance, right? And this is why Julian Assange ties it all together. I go back to what Neil Sheehan said about the Pentagon Papers and Dan Ellsberg. And Neil Sheehan was a big New York Times journalist during the Vietnam War. He covered the Pentagon Papers. And what he said about the Pentagon Papers, what taught him about government secrecy and classified information, was that classified information does not exist to protect the American people from enemies. It exists to protect the American government from the American people. Right. And, I mean, you can have this arrogance where you believe that you can manage nuclear war. You have this arrogance that you believe that you can, push Russia and China and defeat them like it's some type of real world game of Risk. Right. You can have this arrogance that comes after decades of nothing but failed and counterproductive and incredibly immoral and horrendous wars, thinking that, this next one will be different. Right. I mean, that's what we see over and over again. And a guy like Julian Assange comes along and exposes all your greed, all your corruption, all your faults, all the fact that you torture, that you pay off people, that you've just done one mistake after the other. Well, that takes a swipe at your arrogance. And that's something that people in power in DC, whether Republican or Democrat, just can't have.
I'll tell you, I'd love to be in the Senate, in the gallery, when you're out there delivering your first speech on the possibility of nuclear weapons, and your many years in combat, 2 tours of Iraq and Afghanistan. I think it would be great. And I think people should definitely get out there and support you. We'll get back to your website in a minute. How people can contribute. I'm not even sure you gave it out. What is the website?
It's a matforsenate.org, and it's the number 4. So matforsenate.org.
Matt, number 4, Senate. We'll put that up on the screen here. And people, for the next week, we're going to keep putting this out there. It's going to be on radio as well. You won't be able to see that, folks. So it's Matt, the number 4, Senate.org. So you're talking about Assange, and there's a speech that he made in 2010 about the Afghan war. Kelly was able to dig it up. He's in North Carolina, just like you. You guys are practically neighbors. So we're going to play this little pastiche, little 1-minute video of Julian Assange, and I want you to comment on it right afterwards.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. Is anything incorrect, what you just heard from Julian Assange?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd phrase it exactly that way, but it is. These wars are about money and they're about power. And there are generals who want victories and they think they can get victories. That's why you have, in Afghanistan, 19 or 20 or 21 American generals in a row, all thinking that they're going to be the ones who are going to win the war. Right. So the money is incredibly important. It drives everything. But so is this arrogance. So is this megalomania, the desire. Let's all remember that the Congress wanted to give General Petraeus a 5th star, right, for his role in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, so all of that is in there. And I certainly can tell you that a driving force for the Obama administration in escalating the war in Afghanistan was to show that they were better at war than Republicans were, that a black Democrat could be a better commander in chief, a better war fighter than a white Republican. I mean, all those things can't be discounted, but the two of them, you put those together, the money, as Julian just spoke about, and the arrogance, the megalomania, the desire for power, and that helps explain how we have, and it's all part of the continuous line of American history. I mean, this exists before the United States even becomes a country. So, it's nothing new, but I think, unfortunately, we all think our own generations are a bit different than the ones that come before us. And so that's how people can think that, even though it's all the same people, it's all the same corporations, that somehow the Ukraine war can be put in a separate box than the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Yemen and Libya and Somalia, and all the other ones I'm not naming right now, all throughout Africa. People think you can somehow containerize that, right? Put Ukraine differently when it's the same people, same corporations, same militaries involved.
It's like a traveling snake oil salesman. You try it out here for a couple of weeks, and then you move to a different county, and then you go to a different county after that. But it's still the same snake oil that is selling, and you just got a different crowd, and you repackage it. Every time I've done this show over the last 6 months, I've played this, and I got to put it in before we end, and you can comment on it afterwards because you know all about it. This is not an isolated incident, but let's play a version that we have of Collateral Murder and come back with Matthew. We have it there.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse, we have individuals going to the scene, looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons. Let me engage.
Hey, we need to stop that so we can get down there. We
shoot.
You see my location?
Roger. Break. Crazy Horse 1-8, request permission to engage individual. Picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8. We're taking him. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
1-8, engage. Clear. Come on. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
Okay, listen, folks. Before you comment on that, you Can you stay for a few extra minutes here?
Oh yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to say goodbye to our friends in New York City who are listening to this on Progressive Radio Network and other outlets. And we're going to play a little bit of music by Niels Melzer. We're going to go out with Niels Melzer with you folks and say goodbye until next week. And then we'll come back for everybody else with Matthew Ho to talk about what we just witnessed. Okay, that was former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Melzer, the author of the book, The Trial of Julian Assange, who has been on this show many times, way back when that book, The Trial of Julian Assange, was only in German and a year ago. And he's been on many times since. He's been very generous. He's no longer with the UN, but he certainly has had a big impact. And he's like Melville said about John Brown, whose anniversary of his death is coming up soon, his execution, that he was a meteor. And for this movement, I would say that Niels Melzer, indeed, is a meteor that came by and bought us a lot of time. Your thoughts about, before we get to that video, you're aware of his book and you're aware of Melzer's accomplishments. Your thoughts?
Yep. Yeah, and as well as too, I remember being a part of a group of meetings in 2014 in Norway, actually, where we were discussing the that piece of art we just saw, those statues with the those heroes standing on them, and then a fourth chair or standing on those heroes standing on the chairs, right, and then a fourth empty chair for you to stand on. I remember we talked about that, and then actually from there we went and visited Julian in the embassy in London that year, and that was.
Well, you did. You actually visited him.
Yeah, I did, and I remember thinking, it's funny. You pull up there, right?
That experience.
What's that?
What's the background of that experience?
Well, I mean, I was just there over with a couple other American whistleblowers like Kirk Wiebe and Colleen Raleigh and Norman Solomon from Roots Action have put this together. So we went to Norway. We met with a bunch of whistleblowers up there, did some type of strategizing for kind of doing whistleblower stuff, promoting whistleblowers, that kind of thing. That piece of art we just saw was discussed. And then we went down to London to do a number of speaking events. And we were at that point, we were able to go visit Julian in the embassy, and you pull up, and the embassy is right next to Harrods, the world's biggest department store, and there's Bugattis and Ferraris on the street, and it's really it's a surreal atmosphere that you're going to visit somebody who's imprisoned, right? I mean, and then you walk up to it and you look at the building, and I remember thinking like, well, this isn't so bad. I mean, he's got the whole building, right? And then you realize, no, it's half of one floor. Right. And that was 2014. So he had been in there for 2 years at that point.
3 years, yeah.
3 years at that point. And I remember thinking throughout that, and we met with him for a couple, 2 or 3 hours. And just thinking, my God, this man's been here for this long. And of course, that was 8 years ago. It's already been, since 2018 in Belmarsh? Right? 2019 in Belmarsh? Yeah.
2019.
Yeah, I mean, it's so long that the years run together for us, right? That we have trouble keeping track of the time, and for him, but I mean, for me, it was one of those experiences where you just again validated you can't believe what they tell you, because you go in there and you're expecting this is a guy who's going to be a complete narcissist. This is a guy who is just out for himself. The arrogance is going to be there. He's probably going to smell all the bullshit they said about about him, just one more validation that you can't believe them. You can't believe what the media tells you. You can't believe what the government tells you, particularly when they're saying the same thing. You can't believe them. And, that came out through, I've rarely met someone so intelligent, someone who was, here we are to meet him, and all he wants to do is talk about us, wants to know about me, about, everything else. Like, that's the kind of person I found him to be. And so, I supported him. I supported him in WikiLeaks before then. Coming out of that experience, I say, I have to do as much as I can whenever I can to assist with this. And for me, it's personal too, because to bring it back to the collateral murder video you just showed from the Apache gunship, and that's what I spoke about at the rally for Julian on October 8th in DC. I led with that because I had that experience where being asked about WikiLeaks and about this video on MSNBC, and kind of my reaction being, what did you think we were doing over there? And so
that was not exception to the rule. That was basically the rule. That kind of stuff.
I mean, that's what happens. I mean, we kill people. That's what we do. I mean, that's just the exception is that video got highlighted, flagged. It got passed around on the servers over there. What would happen is you'd have all kinds of videos, because you would have all kinds of videos that people would send around on the servers. There'd be porn, right? There are all kinds of stuff. There'd be like bootleg movies and television shows, and occasionally someone would pass around a video from a gunfight, from a gun camera video like that, from the camera from a tank. You would.
Where is that? Wait a second. Where? I hate to interrupt you,
but
where exactly was that? Somebody's cell phone, or was that something that was
that's a part of the weapon system? That's a part of the helicopter itself. So that's the actual gun camera. So what you're seeing is what in an Apache helicopter, you have a pilot and you have a weapons officer, and the weapons officer is the one who would be lining up the gun and to enable them to fire the rounds. And those are 30 millimeter rounds that basically explode. So they're pretty big. Those rounds are about that big. I mean, just giant bullets that explode basically. And I've seen them because when I was in Afghanistan, we had Apaches massacre 2 families. They thought that these families in a grove of trees were insurgents. They weren't. They were 2 families in those trees, and killed at least 9 or 10 of them. No one ever heard of that. No, I mean, I'll say this, Randy, for every civilian casualty event that you had, every time we killed civilians, for every one that the media reported that people back here may have heard about, there are at least 5 or 6 or more that were never reported. Well, so for every video you see like that, there's at least 5 or 6, and you're seeing the video. So think about the number of times it got reported about civilian casualties, about killing civilians or wounding civilians. For every time you heard that, there's at least 5 or 6 more that occurred that you never heard of. I mean, that's just the nature of it. And that's the way war will always be, but you also can see when there's an attitude, there's the desire to kill exists. The want to kill, units get over these places and they want to kill. They want to take part in it. The other units got to kill. They want to kill. They want to prove themselves. It's part of the warrior culture. It's part of what being a Marine Corps or Army infantryman is, and then you see with those helicopter pilots, the same type of thing. Like, they're getting away. We got to kill these guys before they get away. They're putting wounded into a vehicle.
Were they in fear of their lives or something?
No, you kidding me? The helicopter is probably 2,500, 3,000 feet off the ground, completely armored. You need a special weapon. You need a 50 caliber machine gun or larger to damage something like that. Even a 50 cal might not even do something to an Apache. No, those things are perfectly safe. And the number of helicopters we had shot down in these wars, like a handful, and it was all probably out of luck, dumb luck. A couple of good ambushes, I think, but like most of it was luck. But no, those guys were perfectly safe. They were fine. They were in no danger. They were just afraid that this vehicle was going to get away and they weren't going to be able to kill those people. That's what the fear. You hear the anxiety. You hear the come on, Bushmaster 7, give us permission. What they're doing is they're calling up to their higher authority, asking their in that case, their executive officer would be number 7, to tell them to say, yeah, go ahead and kill those guys. And what they're doing, it's not like there's no defense for it either, right? And you can see the narrative, the imperative to kill, the desire to kill, which is all part of the unit, which is all part of the culture over there, right? Because one of the things I'll tell you, I remember having this conversation with a Green Beret officer a number of years ago in Afghanistan. And he said, you know what? In the Green Berets, they're supposed to be out there winning hearts and minds. And he said, you know what? My metric for success at the end of this deployment, the end of this tour, it's not going to be how many people I sat down with and drank tea with and tried to get them to come to our side. It's going to be how many doors I kicked open and people I shot in the head. That's my metric for success. And you saw this with the drones. Drone unit comes in, right? Drone unit comes in, and that drone unit commander leaves, and he's killed 200 people. Next drone unit comes in. What's that commander's criteria for success? Kill more than 200 people. Otherwise, you're not as good as the previous unit. And that's so you have, right? That's why I say it's a lot of it's about unit. It's about the culture, but it's also about the organizational aspects of it, right? Where these helicopter pilots, they're afraid that if they don't kill these guys, they're not going to look as good as other guys in the unit who may have killed more people. So here's an opportunity to make some kills. Right. I mean, as well as too, is you hate the people that you're there supposedly there to protect. You hate these people that you're supposedly there to liberate. You know, you see them as subhuman, you know, that they need to be killed. The only way we're going to free the rest of these people are to kill these people, even though you're in a helicopter 3,000 feet in the air. They were probably 1,000 yards away from those people. Maybe it's not in the city, maybe 400 yards away from those people. You know what I mean? But like that type of thing where you see all this come through in that one video, that culture of killing. And this is why we say war is nothing more than organized murder. That's all it is. And because you see that come through in there.
At all
What's that?
There's no compunction at all, misgivings about doing this by these guys. I mean, what?
When you get home, there is absolutely. When you get home, there is. When you, that's why you have. Look, Iraq and Afghan veterans kill themselves at a rate 6 to 12 times higher than their civilian peers. So it all depends upon your age, right, in terms of where your demographic is. But say you went to the Iraq War, you went to the Afghan War, and of course, the more combat you saw, the higher the rate that is. And yeah, I mean, the reason for that, we really believe, is moral injury. This understanding that you went there, you violated your moral code, you violated your religion, you violated what you know to be wrong, right and wrong. And then, you know, you go there thinking you're going to be the guy with the white hat on. Turns out you're not. Turns out you're the guy with the black hat on. You come home, you have this moral injury occur. It takes some time. You have to get out of that bubble. You got to get out of that culture, right? But things start to seep in. And people have these moral breakdowns. And this is something we've known all throughout history, all throughout humanity. What does Judas do? You know, once he realizes what he did after selling out Jesus, right? What does Lady Macbeth do, right? She can't get the blood off her hands. No matter what she did, she realizes she did wrong, you know, violated who she was. She morally transgressed. And it is something, as someone, Randy, who suffers from traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, I got a bad knee, all kinds of stuff. The moral injury, like, look, my traumatic brain injury it will put me in a migraine that is completely debilitating, where for hours I can do nothing but hope my drugs kick in. Otherwise, I'm just curled in a ball with pain, nausea, fatigue, etc. I would take that any day. I'll take that any time over the moral injury, over that moral crisis I had over taking part in the wars, taking part in those mortars. And what you see again is, so it happens when they come back. And this is why you see the suicide rates are so high. This is why all these guys come back and they try and numb themselves. So many get into drugs, right? So many get hooked on opioids or heroin or now, you know, and then from that, you have the overdoses. And I just had a young man, one of my sailors, when I was in Iraq, John Henley, he overdosed about 1.5 years ago, left behind 3 kids and a wife. No idea whether it was suicide or an accidental overdose, but it really doesn't matter. It certainly doesn't matter to his wife and kids, right? And you see this play out over and over again. And of course, a lot of guys just put the gun in the mouth and blow the back of their head off. You know, certainly I've been around a lot of that too. And it's because of this moral injury, because you're over there, you think you're doing what's right, because you're in the war, because your adrenaline's spooled up, because you've gone through years of training where you've been taught to kill. Look, the Marine Corps and the Army, they bring kids in, and those kids aren't ready to kill. So we put them through years conditioning them to kill, right? You join the Marine Corps, you go to 13 weeks of boot camp. Then if you go in the infantry, you're going to go to about 10 weeks of infantry training. Then you're going to go to your unit, and all you're going to do is practice to kill for your entire time in the Marine Corps. That's what they do. They condition these kids to kill. And so when you're over there, it becomes reflexive. Again, it's part of the culture. Everyone else is doing it. To be a good Marine or be a good soldier, you got to kill. And then you come home and you realize, what did I do this for? Who did I do this for? What was the reason behind it? Those people were no different than my people here at home, on and on and on. And when you're over there, I'll just say this also too. I know I'm saying a lot, but the tempo is such that you don't ever get a time to really process stuff. You're so busy, you're doing so much, you're always on missions, it's go, 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 that you don't process what's happening there, what you're doing, what's been done until you come home in a lot of cases. You just don't have the time to do it, as well as that's the way it's structured. They don't want people sitting around thinking about what they've just done, what they've just went through. I want to keep you busy so you don't have that downtime, right? To think to let this stuff process. So it's when you come home that you really, it hits you that your friends are dead. You killed some woman. You know, what was this all for? This is all for Dick Cheney's buddies at Halliburton, on and on and on.
You know, I'm, back in 84, 85, I toured the country with Dr. Charlie Clements, who was
I know Charlie.
You know Charlie?
Yeah.
A friend of mine. We did a show called Reality versus Rambo with Country Joe McDonald. We went to, this is during the Contra War, and we were going to different congressional and senatorial districts to support candidates who were against aiding the Contras and supporting counterinsurgency in El Salvador and Guatemala. I forgot we had a Vietnam War veteran who told me, this is in 84, 85, that at that point, 12 years after, 10 years after the Vietnam War had ended, 11 years or whatever, that more military personnel had committed suicide, or veterans had committed suicide. There was 55,000 deaths, I believe, in Vietnam, but at this point it had already exceeded that number. And suicides alone is, I said, that's kind of an outrageous figure. It wasn't an outrageous figure. That pretty much is in line with how many people have committed suicide today. I would say it's a lot more, considering not that many people died in Iraq and Afghanistan vis-a-vis.
We know. I mean, the estimates are that, and my numbers are a couple of years old. I haven't looked at this in a couple of years, but 7,000 dead service members in combat, 8,000, 8,500 dead contractors in combat, about 15,000 dead from suicide that we can ascertain. And that number doesn't,
Afghanistan or Iraq or both.
Both, and it's hard. I mean, a lot of us went to both, so you can't really pull them apart, right? Yeah. But and that number doesn't die. That number doesn't end. Look, in 2010, this doesn't get better than with time. This isn't a broken heart. This is a broken soul. And this number does not get better with time. In 2010, the VA, along with the California Department of Veterans Affairs, did a study, and they found that World War II veterans, so these are guys that are in their 80s and 90s, 2010, right? They had gone and they had defeated Imperial Japan. They had liberated the concentration camps. In 2010, in their 80s and 90s, they were still killing themselves at rates four times higher than their peers. I mean, it doesn't end. I mean, and we know this has been historically the case, just the numbers we have from after the Civil War we can put together. I mean, like if you go and you look at contemporary literature from the late 1860s, 70s, 80s, there are all kinds of references to these Civil War veterans who are killing themselves, who are overdosing. You know, with the Civil War, the understanding is that as many men, or nearly as many men, died from morphine overdose after the war than died during the war. And certainly with the Vietnam War, as you brought up, Randy, one of the things that I've heard said, because the other thing that doesn't get talked about with the Vietnam veterans is the Agent Orange and how many were killed from that, including their own children, because you could pass that through. As we see with the Vietnamese generations later after the war are still having, daily children are being born, stillborn, or being born to deformities, because we launched the largest chemical weapons campaign in the history of war against the Vietnamese with the Agent Orange campaign. If you were to take the Vietnam veteran suicides and the Agent Orange death, if you were to attach those to the Vietnam Memorial in DC, that memorial would extend all the way down to the Lincoln Memorial. So if you know where that is, you know where the Vietnam Memorial is, you think how far that is, that's a couple football fields away, at least probably about four football fields away. That's how big the deaths are. And then, of course, if you include the Vietnamese, the Cambodians, the Laotians, all those that we killed in those wars, those millions, that memorial will go for miles and miles and miles.
Around the world. You know, I just had a friend of mine, Art Roberts, who died.
I'm sorry.
A friend of mine that I grew up with, who was a few years older than I am, was a few years born a few years before me, but he was drafted and he got Agent Orange, and he recently died from Agent Orange from the Vietnam War. So,
yeah, I'm sorry, Randy. Yeah, we lost a friend. We lost a family friend a few years ago from it. I have a good friend. He was a machine gunner in Vietnam. His son died from it. You know, came home and his son was born, and his son was dead a few years later from Agent Orange. And something we don't talk about. We never talk about it.
Well, we're talking about it here. We're talking, actually, you know, it's really interesting. We're here to talk about your campaign, and you don't sound like a candidate. You talk about it. You're a guy who just tells the truth. This is plain speaking from experience. I mean, you could have been there this entire time with rhetoric about your campaign and, you know, where to go to see you and all of that, where to raise money. But you've actually, it's like we're sitting around a table having coffee, and a few people are listening, and you're just telling it like it is, which is very refreshing for a person. Because I know you don't consider yourself a politician, you know, per se. You don't really consider yourself a politician. So what drove you into this, getting into the political arena?
You know, I've been around politics because of the Pentagon sent me, or the Marine Corps sent me to the Pentagon when I was a captain. I was a White House liaison officer. I had to go to Congress all the time. I worked for the Secretary of the Navy. So like I was around that stuff. And then when I resigned from the State Department, I was in the media, and then I ended up becoming an anti-war activist. And so I was very much involved with in DC. I was at a think tank, an anti-war think tank, and we were in Congress all the time. So I've been around it. And like I said earlier, I was on a political action committee to try and get rid of nuclear weapons, you know, things like that. So I've been around it, but I've never, you know, been a part of it or a member of it. I never joined a political party until I joined the Green Party a couple of years ago. You know, and for me, it's a lot of what we've been talking about, this lack of accountability for the wars, for the deaths that go on and the deaths that continue, for which there's been no accountability assigned. There's been no justice for those things. There's been no justice or accountability for all the financial crashes we had, right? I mean, how many people have been ruined with the recurrent, with like, you know, with the continuous financial crashes we have, with the bubbles that burst, and then the banks get bailed out and corporations get record profits and people get screwed and they get put under from it. And, you know, and no action on the climate, no accountability for that. You know what I mean? Like, and then it's like I said earlier in the show, it's the people in my life, my loved ones who don't have health care, people on my street who are losing their homes, you know, people in my life who's overdosed, you know, the number of people I know who are, like, I'm 49, you know, I'll be 50 next year. And the number of friends of mine, peers I have, who are living paycheck to paycheck, right? And the attitude of like, this wasn't supposed to happen. You know, I mean, that might sound a little elitist or something like that, but the idea that, you know, I have way too many people in my life who are living, and 60% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. So, I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise, but you see it, and you see it getting worse. Right. And I think a lot of it was my anger. There's a lot of anger I have, but then also the belief that if you want to change something, you've got to be involved. And I think that's something you certainly agree with, right? You got to do something.
You
right?
got to do something.
You got to do something. Like you just did it. Drive around for what, 3 months in the truck in DC.
You think I like doing that? I didn't.
Exactly.
I have to do something in
Right.
this short life. There's nothing more invigorating for me than to. It's not like it's a job. It's not just a duty. It's something that's selfish too, because I get something inside going out there. I like being on the battlefield rather than just doing this. You know, I actually like being out there.
Right.
I like speaking at rallies. I like organizing events. I like being in people's faces, and I like demonstrating vigils, whatever. Being part of it, it gives me a lot of energy to do that. It's invigorating. Now, I was going to play this video earlier. Let's get back to Julian Assange for a minute. And this prosecution, a show trial. I want to play this video by my mentor, my late mentor, and he took over when my father died. He kind of stepped in as my godfather, William Kunstler, the civil rights attorney. I want to play this video because it relates to Assange and all these other Daniel Hale and all these other prosecutions that have taken place, Jeffrey Sterling, and John Kiriakou, Thomas Drake. All these people didn't go to trial, but they were, they had to go through the system. And I want to play this. This is a state, this is after Chicago 8, Chicago 7 trial, after the convictions. Bill Kunstler spoke, and this is in a documentary unearthed by his daughters called Disturbing the Universe, the story of the father of Emily and Sarah Kunstler. And we're going to play this little 2-minute, this is the very closing piece from Disturbing the Universe, and we'll talk about it on the other side for a few minutes.
And that's the terrible myth of organized society, that everything that's done through the established system is legal. And that word has a powerful psychological impact. It makes people believe that there is an order to life and an order to a system, and that a person that goes through this order and is convicted has gotten all that is due him, and therefore society can turn its conscience off and look to other things and other times. And that's the terrible thing about these past trials, is that they have this aura of legitimacy, this aura of legality. I suspect that better men than the world has known, and more of them, have gone to their death through a legal system than through all the illegalities in the history of man. 6 million people in Europe during the Third Reich, legal. Sacco Vanzetti, quite legal. The Haymarket defendants, legal. The hundreds of rape trials throughout the South, where black men were condemned to death, all legal. Jesus, legal. Socrates, legal. And that is the kaleidoscopic nature of what we live through here and in other places. Because all tyrants learn that it is far better to do this thing through some semblance of legality than to do it without that pretense.
All right, the ball's in your court there. Your thoughts?
It's the fallacy that justice or law is justice, right? This idea that because something is legal or something is illegal, that confers justice, and it's not. And I think, and I'm sorry he's no longer with you, but what he's saying there, Bill Kunstler saying there is right. That just providing those examples, because we do have an attitude. Look, I remember when 6 years ago when I got arrested at Standing Rock, there was an attitude that you can't do that among circles I traveled in within DC. Not circles I traveled in within Veterans for Peace and Code Pink and other groups like that, but think tank circles, because it's illegal. You can't do that. You got to respect the law. And this fallacy that the law is justice is just something that I think Kunstler there really does a beautiful job of laying out. That no, it's not. It's the law is nothing more than a construct put into place by the men in power. That's all it is, to protect their power. That's all it is, and all it ever will be. And that's why the urgency of what we're doing and the urgency of what so many have done, going back to Socrates and Jesus, like as he says, right, is with us and will always be with us, and why it never ends. There'll be 50 years from now a Randy Credico, and there'll be a Matt Ho, and there'll be, a Kelly Lane, and a Dan Ellsberg, and a Daniel Hale, and Julian Assange. There will always be men and women who are standing up against that legal construct that portrays itself as justice to do nothing other than just maintain power. And I mean, I think that's what really it comes down to, is that so much of what the American government does is on that altar of the moral assuredness that our nation was built upon, right? This idea that we believe in freedoms, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. We are a nation of law. We are a rules-based society. All these tropes that you and I know are complete BS. So Julian Assange, when he speaks to these things, when WikiLeaks releases what it releases, it cracks that open. This edifice that we're up against, that information cracks it open, because the biggest impediment to us pulling down that edifice is people understanding what the edifice actually is. As long as they believe the edifice is built upon the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and don't understand, no, it's really built on money and corruption and power and killing, we're not going to be able to pull it down. And so when Assange comes along, what's that?
It's all window dressing.
It is. And so what Assange and WikiLeaks does is helps people understand that. And that's why he's so dangerous. And that's why they want to murder him. I personally don't think they want him to come here to the United States. I think that they really hope he dies in Belmarsh. I don't think they want to have that trial here. I think there's a possibility.
I think most people subscribe to that analysis. You've been such a great advocate for him, and a great advocate for social, economic, racial justice, human rights, and all of that, and just a model candidate. Just the idea of being a politician, is a contradiction to what you stand for, and perhaps maybe you will inspire other people to run, other people to get involved. Other politicians to behave and do something that's morally courageous and stand up irrespective of what happens to their careers. So you got to be willing to run, and if you lose, you lose, but take a principled stand. And I say that to you, AOC and the squad. You've got to stand up, and you've got a lot of people believe in what you stood for, but you're just not putting it into action, and it makes us all very cynical. I hate to say it, but it's true. Matthew Ho is running for Senate on November 8th. If you live in North Carolina, or if you know people that live in North Carolina, please tell them to get out to vote. Is there early voting?
There is early voting. Early voting is underway. So it has ended today. But we have early voting all through next week, all the way to the Saturday before Election Day. And then, of course, Election Day on November 8th.
Okay. And people, once again, MatthewForSenate.org. Matthew for Matt. Is
Matt,
it Matt?
It's MattForSenate.org. Yeah.
Matt, yeah. It's
and the number 4. Yeah.
MATT number 4 Senate.org. And please make a contribution. And try to get people out there that to vote for Matt. I know it's a difficult road to hoe, but you're doing God's work out there, and I appreciate all that you've done over your lifetime and your commitment to all of the good things all the good things that is possible in the human spirit you embody, and I appreciate it very much, Matthew Ho. And I want to thank Kelly Lane. We're going to go out, but we're going to go out with this this tune. It's from Gold Diggers of 1933. It's called "My Forgotten Man." It's about. Have you seen the film?
No, I have not.
It's a tremendous. It's all about those who were screwed over in World War I. You remember Coxey's army and all of that, and
the bonus march, and
right. All right. So all of those people that got screwed over and left out under the bus, homeless, and just like any other war, and that's what this is all about. This is Joan Blondell and Etta Mouton. It's a tremendous ending anti-war extravaganza by Busby Berkeley, who choreographed it from 1933, called Gold Diggers of 33. We played it before, but it's always worth watching here at the end. I want to thank you, Matthew, and we're going to play it now, or not play it now, put it on later, add it to the end. But I'm going to say goodbye to everybody out there, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay.
Remember my forgotten man? You put a rifle in his hand. You sent him far away. You shouted, hip hooray! But look at him today. Remember my forgotten man. You had him cultivate the land. He walked behind a plow. The sweat fell from his brow. But look at him right now. And once he used to love me. I was happy then. He used to take care of me. Won't you bring him back again? 'Cause ever since the world began, a woman's got to have a man. Forgetting him, you see, means you're forgetting me. Like my forgotten man.
Remember my forgotten man. You put a rifle in his hand. You sent him far away. You shouted hip hooray. But look at him today. Remember my forgotten man. You had him cultivate the land. He walked behind the plow. The sweat fell from his brow. But look at him right now. And once he used to love me. I was happy then. He used to take care of me. Won't you bring him back again? 'Cause ever since the world began, a woman's got to have a man. Forgetting him, you see, means you're